Hey, we're ready for liftoff here, and we're looking forward to a great podcast with you. Behind the Pulpit, February 10th, 2025, and we got a lot going on in today's show. We got some news stories to cover. We got a sermon to dissect and a sermon series to wrap up. We've got a great book war going on, and we got a lot of cool things happening in terms of our body life announcements. So stick with us. This is what we call long-form journalism, our weekly 45-minute to 1 hour podcast.
So
together.
I did hear that at the White House, they are letting people apply for new media seats. Do you think we should fill out an application, see if they'll let us go?
Behind the Pulpit should be at least in front row, second row.
What if you got in there and you were... What was the question you would ask?
I got questions. I got some questions for you, Mr. Trump.
They're letting podcasters go in there now, so who knows? Maybe we can get in and ask questions.
Where's the link? Let me fill out that form.
whitehouse.gov/new media. There we go.
Man.
Noah, check it out.
All right. We'll get on there. Hey, good to be with you guys. And we want to talk to you about a lot of things, but let's just kind of catch up a little bit on some things that are happening in the news. All right, it is the Monday morning.
We missed 2 weeks, and what a 2 weeks it was, Pastor Dave. It was like 100 news stories every day.
I know, yeah.
We got to pick and choose here.
It's overwhelming. It is the Monday after the Super Bowl, though, and were you pulling for the Chiefs or the Eagles?
Wait, you know what? Because we spend so much time in Philadelphia, I went to school outside Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. We had to root for the Eagles. We were asking for them to fly, and fly they did, Pastor Day. Actually, the end score
were answered.
The end score looked a lot closer than it actually was.
That's true. Yeah, I think the Eagles,
and it wasn't even that close.
Do whatever you want. We got this in the bag. We already poured the Gatorade and everything. So
yeah,
I don't know. I was kind of I was uncertain who to root for. A three-peat would have been fun on the Chiefs' part. As a Cowboys fan, I find it very difficult to root for the Eagles. Although I do think this was their year and had just a dominating performance in terms of a Super Bowl. Not since the mid-'90s when the Cowboys, I think, ran up the scoreboard to 55 or something on the. I think that was the Bills. Have I seen such a blowout in terms of a Super Bowl? So it was good.
Wow.
The Eagles. It's their year.
It was their year.
Extra things happening in the Super Bowl. I was pleased with the national anthem. I thought
that was kind of fun.
The guy from New Orleans. I'm not remembering his name.
Lauren Daigle did the America the Beautiful.
So Lauren Daigle's, that was kind of like a happening version of America the Beautiful. There was that trombone guy. I can't remember the nickname.
For Pastor Chad, they had all the Cajuns up there, just kind of up there singing and bringing the New Orleans blues.
Yeah.
I did hear that for some reason she got shut out of the New Year's Eve whatever they were doing for music for New Year's Eve in New Orleans because she was part of a worship event, and so now she was at the Super Bowl, so this was kind of her revenge. But she did quite a job. She did a good job.
What a voice.
Yeah.
Did you catch any of those commercials during the Super Bowl?
I saw a few commercials. My kids were all over the place, so I didn't get to focus on them. There was a few that made me chuckle. There was one, and I'm forgetting what it was. I was telling these guys before we started recording. There was one where there was a guy, like a principal in a high school, and he was dancing around, and then he jumped up, and on his back there was a "Kick Me" sign. Mm-hmm. But I'm forgetting what it was advertising.
I think I remember that. Do you guys remember?
Was that the Pat McAfee one?
It might have been.
I don't know. I saw something about like a Pat McAfee as doing a commercial as a principal in a school. Was he wearing red?
I think that maybe that was it.
Okay, that's probably what it was. I didn't.
We had the Eli and Peyton commercials.
Oh,
right?
who got the kick? They were supposed to do like a kick, right? Who did either of them make the field goal? I watched it. I just missed that part.
Google that for us, Tim. But
I'll look it up.
What about the Ben Affleck Dunkin' Donuts commercials?
Oh, that's right. Where the guy was coming up out of the coffee grounds, and then he's like, "I'm down here looking for whatever."
I wasn't feeling it. Were they trying to diss Starbucks? Is that what was going on there? I didn't quite understand.
It was odd, right?
They were like, "Hey, everybody just needs a cup of coffee. They don't need all this special,
Well, that is kind of what Dunkin' Donuts is known for, right?
America runs on Dunkin'.
Yeah.
So that was good.
By the way, it was Eli Manning who won the kick of destiny, which I
right.
would have picked him to
Go Giants.
to do that
Okay.
over Peyton personally. But
Giants fan over here. Was it hard for you to root for the Eagles too in the NFC East rivalry going on?
I can never root for them.
You could never. Yeah. So you're going for the Chiefs.
Yeah.
What happened last night to the Chiefs? I just think they just got completely shut down. There was
It was
nothing.
not. It was not pretty.
their
man.
offensive
Just
line
from
was
the beginning.
exposed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, Mahomes right got sacked like 5 times.
oh man, it was
Wasn't
wasn't
not
that
a good.
exciting. It was a little on the boring side because it was such a blowout.
It was.
feel
I
like.
know. I remember like the last Super Bowl 24, the 49ers and Broncos. The 49ers won like 55-0.
Yeah.
That's it's lame.
Yeah.
You want it to be close, right?
Denver and Seattle had one like that.
I
a few
saw
years
that,
ago.
yeah,
the one
yeah.
at MetLife Stadium, where it started with the fumble over the bad snap over Peyton Manning's head to start the game, and then it was just all downhill from there.
Just-
That one was a stinker.
Rough start.
Not good. Not good.
So good commercials. I enjoyed the Harrison Ford one.
Oh, the Harrison Ford one was good. I did see that. He's in the Jeep and he goes, "Even though my name is Ford." Can you believe that guy is like 85?
Is he really?
He's in his 80s somewhere.
He's still doing great work, man.
It's great. And he was walking around like he's going to bench press somebody. I mean,
Oh man. If
I
we
think
could only be
he's
so
82. He might be.
ruggedly handsome at 85.
Yes, I know.
Okay, so there's that one. Lay's potato chips.
Oh,
got
man.
the tissues going.
I
That little girl growing the potato plant all year, and then she gets the potato and puts it on the pickup truck with the rest of the potatoes.
it got me.
That was good, man.
I'm sitting there. I'm going to be vulnerable with the audience. I'm sitting there eating the wings, and she brings up the potato, the singular potato, to her father, and you just see the juxtaposition of her potato and how excited she was about it with the gigantic truck full of potatoes. Oh man, it got me.
Right.
The tears were going, Pastor Dave.
It was good. So those were some of the good commercials. I did have a couple problems with some of the
Let 'em know.
commercials. So
Feed the trolls.
I think we talked about this last year on the podcast with the He Gets Us campaign. I don't know. Is it the Green family that funds these things with their
The Hobby Lobby people.
I feel like they're behind the He Gets Us, but I'm not remembering. Anyway, so whoever's behind the He Gets Us, I appreciate wanting to spread the name of Jesus. And, if you want to spend $8 million or whatever it is to have a half-hour Super Bowl commercial, more
Yeah.
power to you.
Yeah.
But what they're doing there, did you see the He Gets Us one this year?
I didn't.
Oh,
I
all right,
didn't.
so-
I,
saw it.
I read about it though.
Yeah. Okay. So this was different. Last year was, I think, a little bit more in your face. This one was about greatness. And it was.
I did read that's what it was
What
about.
is the
Yeah.
nature of greatness? So they had opportunities to serve different, let's say, oppressed people groups. Sometimes it was like, yeah, great, let's serve that person. That's true greatness. But then they had to sprinkle in some leftist causes. So you had like somebody hugging somebody from the LGBTQ community at some sort of pride event with rainbows. So that's greatness. You had somebody. There was some kind of like graffiti that said "Go back home" or something like that to an illegal immigrant, and then that person was washing off the graffiti. So it was almost like saying, if you have any kind of position where you think the border is secure, then you're automatically, prejudiced and bigoted,
Right.
and you should be shut down, and this is a problem.
So a
And
bit of a simplistic reading on that.
a little simplistic, I feel like. So the great Megan Basham, who I don't think is a very big football fan, she did tweet out about the He Gets Us commercial, and I'll just read what she said. She said this: "The He Gets Us ads are actually incredibly harmful to the cause of evangelism because the campaign reinforces what culture wants to believe about Jesus while leaving out what culture doesn't want to believe. If culture's wrong ideas about Jesus become more deeply seated due to a campaign like this, it simply makes it harder for biblically faithful Christians to share about the real Jesus, a Jesus people often don't want to hear about." I thought she made a good point there.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the He Gets Us thing?
Well, I think the larger undertones of the whole thing is this sort of dichotomy about how people are engaging with culture and evangelism, and the He Gets Us is more on the side of what's sort of become what's become known as the winsomeness. So we're going to be winsome. We're going to be attractive. We're going to come, try to find some kind of common ground, even if we disagree. And other people are saying, no, we need to speak kind of truth even into these issues, even if it's offensive. Like Jesus basically said, the world hated me, and the world is going to hate you. Kind of the John 15 argument. And there seems to be a dichotomy of this. So like there's certain people that were highlighting this. Oh, let's pray for people as they're watching the He Gets Us. I think Ed Stetzer put that out, and then I saw Megan comment to him. Something like, you've been in ministry for how long, and how do you not get what Jesus actually stands for, type of thing. So there's like people drawing lines on how to actually do this engagement nowadays. Which actually, it's sort of interesting. If we can we move into that other news story about Wheaton College?
That's a good segue.
Yeah. So Wheaton College. So
this was what, Friday, Saturday?
I think it was Friday.
When did Russell get confirmed? Friday night?
Something
Russell
like that.
Vogt?
So
How do you pronounce it?
Russell
Vogt?
Voug. So either vote or vout. He is confirmed as the leading the Office of Management and Budget, and he's actually done this before. I think he did it during the first Trump administration. So he's got some conservative credentials, and he went to Wheaton College. And so Wheaton College on social media put out a post that congratulated him and asked people to pray for him. And then apparently there was a bunch of chatter online from people that don't like the current administration, and Wheaton College basically retracted their post. And it was very confusing because their retraction was basically saying, normally when people go to an office like that, we would ask people to pray for them and post congratulations. But it created a bunch of negative comments on their social media platforms that they decided to retract it. And so people were asking, so that's a bit confusing, because are you saying we shouldn't pray for him because he's in the current presidential administration? And now everybody kind of on the other side of the aisle was roasting Wheaton. So Wheaton basically is in a lose-lose thing right here. I don't know what they're going to do. But the messaging was very confusing, I think, to a lot of folks, and me included. I don't know why we can't just say this guy is in this position and we're going to pray for him. We should pray for people, especially if we disagree with them. We should be praying for them. I saw a couple of people make that post, like this guy's running the Office of Management and Budget, and they asked him to pray for him. What is the issue here? And yet that's what we're living through, Pastor Dave. So I don't know. What do you think?
I was thinking, if this person was nominated to a different presidential administration, would things have gone differently? So, I mean, it's just like he's an alumni. Hey, this is pretty cool. One of our alumni is getting to be part of the presidential administration. Let's pray for him. It's not unusual to highlight like the happenings of your alumni, right? Usually it's like the school or college or seminary has like a publication, and I don't know if Denver has this, but you see regularly what the graduates are doing, and if anybody's going involved in anything important. This is kind of important. So
yeah,
I don't know if you remember back in his other grilling session in 2017, he was getting grilled about his exclusivity of the gospel, and Bernie Sanders was going after him about whether or not he thinks that Muslims are going to be not going to heaven or out of favor with God. I can't remember exactly the reasoning, but
it had nothing to do with his position in Office of Management and Budget, but he was going after his theological stance, one that we would agree with, and that was what he was getting grilled over.
Right. And ironically, one that most Muslims would agree with. From their perspective, they would also see that Christians are outside of the boundaries of, God's favor as well, because of our theological beliefs. And so this guy's come under fire quite a few times. I don't think that'll affect his ability to perform, but Wheaton retracted it. I thought that was unfortunate, but that was in the news.
Right.
Big weekend
so Wheaton
story.
could have just said, we're asking people to pray for him, and we stand by that. We should pray for anybody who's in government,
right.
Whether we agree or disagree.
Yeah,
but no, they retracted their request for prayer.
Probably Monday morning quarterbacking. That's probably what many of the administration at Wheaton wish they would have done. So that's our In the News segment. A lot going on. And we've now entered that time in our program where we get to do the Great Book War. So
Were you thinking about this all weekend, Pastor Dave? We haven't had a show in 2 weeks.
This
You've
should
been
be a
thinking
good
for
one.
2 weeks.
You know what? I'm gonna do it. This one's worth 2 points.
Oh my gosh.
We missed a week. This one's worth 2 points. And I do believe I'm slacking a little bit on the graphic here, but I believe Pastor Bob is up by 2 points. So this could be a big swing here.
Okay.
He's going to go for a 2-point conversion.
You go first then, Pastor Bob. Let's see how you're faring today.
All right. Well,
I see you've got...
today I decided to go with a devotional resource. So I didn't pull out the big guns, I don't think. But I picked this up at a recent conference that we went to down in Philadelphia. It's a devotional resource by David Powlison called Take Heart, Daily Devotions to Deepen Your Faith.
Look at that cover.
Yeah, David Powlison right here used to run the CCEF Counseling Center down connected with Westminster Seminary. I actually met him several times, had dinner with him one time, not by myself, but with other folks around. And very loving, caring guy, very smart guy in the biblical counseling realm. But he's just got these kind of short, pithy devotions to get you started on your day, and really takes you deep into your heart connections with the Lord. And I found it to be beneficial. So it's published by New Growth Press. If you're interested, David Powlison, Take Heart, Daily Devotions to Deepen Your Faith. It's my submission today, Pastor Dave.
The late David Powlison.
The late David, yeah, he passed away in 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go with J.T. English's brand new book, published in 2024, called Deep Discipleship.
Now, did I mention the publication year? 2022.
Mm-hmm. So as far as what's current, I'm winning so far. So J.T. English, his thesis here is that we are all actually already being discipled, and the question is, what is discipling us? And so, are we being discipled by popular media, flashy events, folk theology? And his thesis is that churches have actually neglected our God-given responsibility to make disciples, and the church is not a secondary platform in God's mission to this end, but it's the primary platform that God uses to grow people into the image of Christ. And so what's great about J.T. English is he used to pastor at the Village Church with Matt Chandler. Now he's at a church in Colorado called the Storyline Fellowship, and he's created this kind of 1-year theological certificate program at each of these churches and done a great job with it, and has kind of packaged together his philosophy of discipleship in this book, where he takes theology and then brings it to the life application heart level. And I'm looking forward to diving into this, but I'm only like one chapter in, so I can't.
So his program is like for
say,
people that might say, I don't want to go and spend 2, 3, 4 years in seminary, but I do want to get more theologically formed and be able to read the resources.
Right.
That might be somebody who's a good a lay person who's good. It would be a good resource for them.
Yes. So J.T. English, Dallas Theological Seminary.
Boom.
THM. He also went to Southern for his PhD, but that's my book recommendation. I'm really enjoying it so far. We're reading this in our discipleship cluster group together as a group. So there's my book recommendation, guys. And now we turn the floor over to the judges.
Yes. So unfortunately, we won't have the graphic with the scoreboard up. I have somehow lost my computer input, but
Maybe you can insert it posthumously.
Yes, I can do it posthumously or post production. Yeah. So both. First of all, might be the cover of the year so far in terms of our book covers. Pastor Bob, that devotional, that's gorgeous.
This is just hitting you where
It's hitting me.
hitting you where
Is
you're
it like a
scratching.
I
Huh?
love the color
Watercolor?
scheme. I love what they're doing with the words and everything. However,
The triangles.
I am going to go with Pastor Dave here as
All
someone
right.
who leads a discipleship group, and some of the themes that it sounds like the book covers are ones that often come up in the discipleship group that I help to lead. So Pastor Dave has tied it up. The score is
Yay.
7-7 on this 2-point week, and we are
This is
all
more
even.
interesting than the Super Bowl right here, Pastor Dave.
Yeah,
We're closer.
It's a lot closer than the Super Bowl.
Might have to go into overtime. It's all
I have to
tied
do
up.
the quarterback run and kind of get up to the line of scrimmage.
You guys are keeping it close.
I'm going for the 2-point conversion today.
I'll have
All
to
right,
come back with a better one next week.
well, you'll have 7 days to see if you can take the lead again. All right. Very good. The transition word is all right. We move on to our next segment where we talk about the
Chart setting? No chart settings.
Well, we're going to do that in the sprint side. So hang
Okay.
on to your
All
hat.
right.
We got a great chart. But let's talk a little bit about not only the sermon from yesterday, Bob, but like wrapping up the whole series. So this is sort of a double.
And we do have a question
reflection.
about the sermon that we
good.
can insert midway whenever we...
Wherever the Spirit
Okay.
moves you, you just insert that question.
will, absolutely.
There, Tim. So,
60-second flyover. What was the sermon?
sure. And by the way, I heard we're going to get a wonderful recap video this week, so stay tuned. You want to come for the service
Wear your fire retardant
to
suits.
see that. There will be
ready.
fire.
Dress for the weather.
Or maybe there won't be. Maybe there won't be fire. I don't know.
Sandstorms,
Fire and snow.
snows,
We'll see.
blizzards. I can't wait.
It's a tonal choice, Tim. All right, so yesterday we wrapped up our Overhaul of the Heart series, and we've been looking at the topic of revival. And throughout the course of the series, we defined what revival is. Dave did that the first week. Second week, we talked about the societal impacts, right? That's what we did the second week? What was the second week?
How do we prepare?
Oh,
for
how do we
revival?
prepare for revival? That's right, I did that one. So what's revival? How do we prepare for revival? We talked about societal impacts of revival. We looked at the abortion issue. Dave talked about the central message of revival, and yesterday we talked about how do we activate revival? How does it come about? And we primarily got this from Richard Lovelace's book, Dynamics of the Spiritual Life. So he talks about primary elements, which is what Dave covered in his message, and also secondary elements, which is what I talked about yesterday. There was 5 secondary elements: disenculturation, theological integration, and then the ones we focused on most were prayer, community, and mission. And what we said was those are 3 chemicals that need to mix together to form a reaction like a rocket, and that's what sends revival into the upper atmosphere, even as it fights through the lower atmosphere of the culture that we had, cultural messages we had to break through. So I guess that's 60 seconds. Does that cover it?
Yeah. So on the rocket theme, were you
So unimpressed.
holding on to that illustration for many years, wondering how can I work this into a sermon?
No, it just came to me this coming week, and I thought, you know what? I think maybe rockets will
This is the
work
week.
out. This is the week.
But you said
Yeah.
this stems all the way back from your childhood.
Oh, I loved rockets. I loved the space shuttle. I loved Star Trek. I loved Star Wars. I loved rockets. It was very cool.
Did you ever see that movie about the boys who were trying to have like a rocket competition? And this was like in the early days of inventing rockets, and they were trying to figure out how to get them up. I don't remember the name of that movie.
No, I don't remember what it was.
Okay, so you missed that one.
I don't think I saw that one.
All right, so we're
So
wrapping
I'll just
up the
go
series.
famous rocket movies and see what comes up on Google. Oh, there was the Rocket Man, the Rocketeer.
No,
He had
not
the
the
rocket
Not
jetpack
the
back in the
Rocketeer.
early 90s.
October Sky.
Oh, okay. I do remember that title.
Jake Gyllenhaal vehicle.
Well, that wasn't
is.
that wasn't back when I was a kid. That was Jake Gyllenhaal was later.
Yeah. So, okay. So the secondary elements of revival, if the primary elements are present, now we move on and say, okay, let's add some fuel to this puppy.
Yes.
And you told an interesting story about a real life revival that occurred not too far from here.
Yeah, the what's been called the New York City or the layman's revival of 1857, which was started by a bunch of business folks who were just getting together in Manhattan to pray
At lunchtime.
At lunchtime,
Like
12:30
for like an hour.
p.m. for an hour, and it just took off. It started to spread in New York, and then eventually to other cities, and then kind of around the country at the time. And it was right before the Civil War. So divided country, lots of challenges and division and unrest. There was an economic crash which added fuel to the fire. There was a need that people felt, and
Right.
many people came to Christ as a result of it.
And you said some people speculate, not just in New York, but throughout the country. Like
Throughout
a
the
million?
country, the source I read,
Converts?
people were speculating 1 million people. 1 million people came to Christ during
Right.
that revival. So that was quite the revival, Pastor Dave.
I was not expecting that number because I had always heard it was 80,000, but I think that
Oh.
was limited to New York City, though.
I could see that. Yeah. So if you're
So I think that
around
because
the
they were
country.
saying 10%, and I think New York City was like around 800,000, and like 80,000 was the number of Christians present after the revival had fully taken root.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned the three things. Is there one of the three things that you think is the challenge of our day? Is there one of those three ingredients of the fuel that you feel like
yeah.
we really need to add this ingredient? It's not happening.
Right. So in Lovelace's thing, there's 5. So I tried to mention those 2 at the beginning, but really focused in on the 3. I think obviously the challenge is not to get caught up in cultural messages, and that's his point about the enculturation. So I tried to tie that in with the rocket illustration that when the rocket takes off, the lower atmosphere is thicker. You have to fight through it. You have to break free.
I remember that.
And that's sort of similar to what happens with cultural messages, that if I think if you don't have those last 3 chemicals, so to speak, that we talked about, you're not going to break free from the cultural messages if you're not praying, if you're not in community and people speaking truth to you and you to them, and if you're not having a heart for mission and for the gospel to go, it's going to be very easy to live a very comfortable life and become complacent. Mm-hmm. Of the 3, you're asking me which one is the one that people struggle with the most?
Is there one that stands out to you as like, we really don't have this ingredient, and unless we do it, this isn't going to happen?
Well, I mean, I guess in my mind,
It's kind of subjective.
prayer,
It's okay. There's not like a right
prayer
answer.
and mission are like, prayer is the foundation, and that's going to lead to mission, and community is a bit of a byproduct of that. Mm-hmm. I think that just kind of happens. I think you got to start with prayer, and because it's easy to start with prayer. A lot of people love to pray, and then they like to get in their groups of people that agree with them. But then mission is a harder thing. Now I got to go out. I got to take a risk. My faith has to be public. I think that's a challenge for a lot. And the last couple of years, that's been a big challenge because sharing about your faith in public has cost a lot of folks, and will continue to. The cultural waves may shift, but mission is something we have to continually push ourselves towards. There are people that need to know Christ, and we need to seek them out.
So it's that third one. So you mentioned 5.
Well, I guess if I had to pick one, I guess I'll pick the third one. But they're all important.
You mentioned 5. Do you remember
Yeah.
what the 5th one was?
Theological integration.
Oh.
So that was the one I said the least about, but that was the idea that you're taking all your understanding of biblical doctrine and incorporating it into your worldview and how you engage the wider culture. So you have to break free from the culture, you have to develop a biblical worldview, and then those last 3 elements are crucial for your spiritual formation.
It sounds a little bit like deep discipleship, man. Theological
All right,
integration.
plug your
You
book.
already won
I
the-
get
you
it.
already
I
won.
get it that you won. Okay, your 2-point conversion right there, just because you. Maybe next week it should be worth 3.
There's like no rules. Tim can do whatever he wants back there.
I am the book war czar.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So we're wrapping up the series, Bob. And does that feel like a little bit bittersweet here as we kind of move on from the exciting topic of revival?
It is, but I'm equally excited about the resilience topic in 2 Corinthians that we're diving into next week. Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be a lot of really good stuff there. But I thought this was a great way to kind of launch the new year, launch 2025. I think revival has been a topic that a lot of people are resonating with and want to pray for, want to see happen, and I think that's an exciting thing.
So I have a question.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk
here
about
comes
that.
the
We
question.
had a submitted question for
So
the sermon.
I apologize that I'm not able to put it up on the screen for you, but I will read it, and let me know if you need me to read it again. The question is, in addition to the 3 points in the sermon on Acts 2:42, and they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship to the breaking of bread and the prayers. What role does communion or breaking of bread have as part of the chemical reaction, in quotes, in our church, also mentioned in verse 46?
Yeah, good question. Although I think the breaking of bread can also, in that verse, can also be referring to just the fact that they were having fellowship within their homes and eating meals together. Not necessarily the Lord's Supper, although I'm sure there was a lot of that as well. I would put that within the community umbrella. So the idea of coming together as the body of Christ, receiving the Lord's Supper as we did yesterday, it's a family meal. And those are people that have committed themselves to the local body of Christ. They've given them their lives to Him, and they want to live together in community. So I think it's definitely underneath that umbrella. And and then the breaking of bread, hopefully you're seeing hospitality and people inviting people into their homes and growing deeper in their understanding of them, and then you're praying for each other. And I did mean that at the beginning of the community section. I talked about how somebody once told me, and I think this is true, that when you actually say, I'm going to be praying for somebody, it connects your hearts together. So if I'm actively praying for Tim every day, I'm gonna feel a bigger connection with him than if I just see him and wave and say hi and don't give any thought to him throughout the week. Because likely when I'm praying for him, I know about some of the things that are going on in his life, and vice versa. So yeah, I guess the short answer would be I'd put it underneath that community topic. I don't know, would you add anything to that?
I mean, there's two ways that the breaking of bread is used in the Bible. It can be just more table fellowship. I did mention as I led communion that another way to understand this is through the Lord's table as well. It's kind of used both ways. So regarding the question specifically, I do think communion is part of what theologians call the outward and ordinary means of grace that God has given us in order that we might grow. And so when we come to the table on a regular basis, I think that's an opportunity to bear witness to the gospel again, to remind ourselves of grace, to also confess, to get right with the Lord and have a regular time of fellowship and communion with Him. So I think it's really important. Some churches, I mean, they practice communion very infrequently. I mean, I was talking to one pastor friend of mine
twice a
that
year
was-
on a
yeah,
Wednesday night,
right?
with 5 people.
I don't think that's healthy. I think the Lord specifically has given us this ordinance as something He's ordered us to do, that we might come back to the table and be reminded again of grace in a fresh way, not just for our justification, but remember, it's for our sanctification as well. So we're saved by grace through faith. We also grow by grace through faith.
A lot of people
as well.
do it every week.
Yeah.
Which I actually wouldn't mind doing that. I think
Right.
it's a good reminder of the gospel, keeping your focus on that.
Yeah. So I think there's kind of two dangers with communion and regarding this topic. You can either underemphasize it or overemphasize it. I don't think that we want to go so far as to say that we have to get this sacrament in order for the grace to be infused in our lives, and there's something that we're missing if we don't get to the service. And, you know, one of the people that's surrounding the president right now is Paula White. She's kind of heading up this, well, should we call it an evangelical cohort of pastors that are part of the
Office of
spiritual
Faith
community?
Management
And,
or something.
You know, Paula White has this teaching about communion that it's very much interlocked with our, not just our fellowship with God, but even our physical health. And so if you look up on YouTube, you'll see Paula White teaching that she takes communion sometimes multiple times a day by herself. And this is, I think, an overemphasis on what's going on there when we remember the cup and break the bread. So I think you can kind of overdo it, but I think you can also kind of undersell it as well. I think it's an important ordinance that the Lord has given us, and I do think it plays a role. It has played a role in revivals in the past. So one of the key things that Jonathan Edwards did was he was an old school pastor shepherd that would actually do home visitations. And when he didn't see the signs of conversion in someone's life or in their household, he would respectfully ask them to refrain from taking communion at his church. And this got him into a lot of trouble with church members there at Northampton, in Northampton, Massachusetts. But this was something that he felt he was compelled to do as a pastor, to warn people that they would eat and drink judgment upon themselves because they were not taking communion in a worthy manner. And so because of his instruction surrounding that, that was a big part of the First Great Awakening occurring, that he was taking this sacrament of communion very seriously, or the ordinance of communion very seriously. So it has played a role in the past. That's a really great question. Clearly, the New Testament apostles were practicing this, and I think we need to continue that practice as well. Tim, good question.
Oh, it wasn't my question, but
Well, thank you for drawing
Yeah.
it to our attention.
you're
Tim.
welcome. Thank you for
there you go.
asking it, whoever it was that
Yes.
did the asking.
It was sort of like the cover on this book. It was very attractive.
It's a really attractive cover.
This book that didn't win the book war this week.
Listen, man.
All right. Well, Pastor Dave, what was your big takeaway?
Don't judge a book by its cover.
I will. What was your big takeaway from the series? So speaking about the series in general.
When revival happens again in our generation, I want to play. I want to be a part of it. I am excited about it. I think the Lord is up to something even right now. I had shared a conglomeration this morning on social media of a bunch of Eagles players, giving clear testimony to their faith in Jesus Christ. And I think it's an exciting time to be a Christian. I think the Lord's at work. Aslan is on the move. So
he's about to roar, maybe.
Yeah. So I'm glad we got to be a part of that.
Winter is rolling back and Father Christmas is coming.
Yes. Right now, it does kind of feel like always winter and never Christmas. It's been cold out there. It's been snowy.
Oh, man.
Yesterday was icy. But,
very true.
The thaw is coming.
Look out, Jadis.
And we missed Groundhog Day last week.
But he saw a
podcast.
shadow, so
He
apparently
did.
we're going to have a longer winter.
Punxsutawney Phil.
Yeah. Phil didn't come through for us.
No, he didn't.
Nope.
Yeah.
Come on, Phil.
Stupid
They really
tradition.
get into
better.
that, don't they? Have you ever watched that televised event? They
I
get
haven't,
their
but I've
top
seen.
hats and everything. They read the scroll. Hear ye, hear ye.
By the way, coming back to an earlier conversation, I did look up 13 best rocket movies about rockets, and October Sky was number one. That was in 1999.
Yeah.
Jake Gyllenhaal, Chris Cooper, Laura Dern, Chris Owen,
Great film.
William Lee Scott. And then number two, a movie that maybe has application today, and actually a really good movie, is the movie called The Martian with Matt Damon. Have you seen that one?
I did.
He gets stuck on
There's
Mars.
also potatoes in that movie.
I'm feeling it.
Well, potatoes.
Feel the tears.
Maybe The Martian might be more real than we know in the coming years. We'll see.
Yeah.
Apollo 13 was a great one, too.
We could take the show in a very weird direction
Interstellar.
right now, but I'm not going to do that.
The Right Stuff.
So,
Armageddon. Gravity.
thank you, Bob.
Look at all these movies about rockets, Pastor Dave. Oh, my goodness.
I don't think we're getting invited to the White House
All
if we
right.
keep this
Space
up.
Cowboys.
I already tried. I think they took it down. They got over 7,000 submissions.
Oh, wow.
I think they're done taking.
Oh,
I was going to
come
apply.
on.
I was going to
Come
apply.
on, man.
I'm going to be like, guys, we applied. We're on the wait list.
It's worth a shot. Can we go on Zoom or
All right.
something?
Maybe.
So, anything else on the sermon before we wrap up that segment?
I don't think so, but you're kicking off the sermon series for this week. So, do you have you given it some thought? Give us a sneak preview about resilience in 2 Corinthians.
Sure. So,
The resilient
we're really
life.
excited to talk about this. It's a little bit of a crisis of resilience in our day, and I think we need to relearn some of the skills and the character traits that God has given His church to withstand some of the most difficult of circumstances over the last couple thousand years. So 2 Corinthians, there was one person that really embodies resilience in the New Testament, and that is the Apostle Paul. And he really gets into it in this particular letter. This is the one where he talks about being struck down but not destroyed. And it's going to be a fun series. I hope that you're going to make it this Sunday to help us with the kickoff as we start a brand new series in an epistle of Paul. How long has it been since we did an epistle of Paul? It's been a while.
That's
that
a great question.
We just did Philippians, right?
Well, we did do Philippians. That's true. I was going back to Romans, which we did during COVID. But maybe, I guess it was Philippians.
Philippians was 2023. I mean, that's like almost 2 years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and Paul wrote a lot of letters, right?
back to Paul's letters.
As he writes, we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison.
Come on, somebody.
C.S. Lewis wrote that weight of glory. You're going to have to bust out some C.S. Lewis in this series, Pastor Dave.
I never like to be too far from a C.S. Lewis quote.
That's true.
So
There you go.
You might get that.
You will be more resilient as a result of listening to this series.
Next Sunday. And we're going to go to that part of the show where we do a little sprinting, I think. And this time we got to...
And it's
We got
you're
something a
gonna-
little special
You're
this
going to
time.
have an interlocking segment here with theological sprint and a chart because you were able to prepare for it.
Yes.
We had a great question that came in that we're moving into the sprint.
So we have a school that meets here on Wednesdays. It's kind of like a homeschool co-op called Cornerstone. And Bob and I got an email last night from one of the students, and one of the students was given a homework assignment. And the homework assignment was to go to your church and ask your pastor to define virtue. And so we decided, rather than just write him an email, we would use this as our theology sprint time.
So
boom, Chris, welcome to the show.
Noah will cut it up, and we'll send him the short, and then he can just give his assignment is done. So you're welcome. There you go.
That's right.
Doing your homework for
Fully
you.
produced in 4K.
Yeah.
Christopher, you welcome to the show.
With fire.
Oh no, you gotta hook him up. Hook him up with the works.
Make it happen.
So I'll start, if that's okay.
Hey, you can take it. You got the chart.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Before we get to
I
the
don't have a
chart,
chart.
Don't show the chart yet. So
I can't.
a
But
couple of summers ago, I went down to Outer Banks for the first time, and I brought Volume 8 of my Jonathan Edwards Yale Press collection to the beach.
Come on.
And in that particular volume is his famous work called On the Nature of True Virtue. And I've always wanted to read that, so I'm like, okay, I got a week. I'm going to try to digest this heavy, dense philosophical treatise. And Edwards defines virtue in that book quite well. And in the book, he makes a distinction between two kinds of virtues. He talks about common virtue and true virtue. So true virtue is the kind of virtue that Jesus Christ had. He would say things like, I always do those things which please my Father. He never sinned. He always obeyed at the heart level. He always exercised perfect virtue. Ethically, he was without flaw. He was impeccable. He was blameless. He was he was harmless and undefiled, right?
He was homeless too.
That's true. I didn't mean that, but that's actually true. He had nowhere to lay his head, but he was completely perfect, and he had true virtue. Edward says that's the standard, but there's also something called common virtue, and in the book he says that's when people do the right thing, but it only looks like they're doing the right thing on the outside, but when you look, the problem is like they don't necessarily do it for the right reasons, or they don't do it in a godly way that's God glorifying. And so common virtue is when you do the right things for the wrong reason. So like, here's an example, like the common virtue of honesty. Some people are honest, but they're not honest out of true virtue. They're honest because they're afraid, because it pays to be honest, and sometimes there's a cost to being dishonest, right? And they don't want to pay that price.
Yep.
So at the root, it's a very self-centered motivation behind their desire to be honest. So, you know, if you're dishonest, right, you could like lose your job. Your boss could fire you for that, and that would be bad for you. It might cost you a friendship if you're dishonest and you don't want to lose your friendship. In the court of law, you could actually be guilty of perjury and go to jail. You don't want to go to jail, so you're going to be honest because you want to avoid the consequences of being dishonest. That's called common virtue, and that's not exactly what God is after in terms of what we really want to do when things are pleasing to the Lord. So I do want to show a chart. Here's our chart sighting for today, which I thought was
Will the chart make it into the short? That's a good
super
question.
helpful. We don't have a chart.
the chart's going to I lost connection to our computer on here, so we'll go up
All right,
after.
so
Can I explain it?
Yeah,
then
sure.
I don't know
Okay.
what this chart
Explain
is.
it
Yesterday.
as if it's up there right now, which
All
it
right.
is to those who are watching on YouTube.
Lord willing, you'll be looking at a chart
Wow.
that looks like this. It's called the Virtue Continuum.
My
and
goodness, that looks like the solar system.
on the left side, you'll see the deficiencies, and on the right side, you'll see the excesses of these different areas
I
of
see.
virtue. So if you want to be
That's
a
quite-
person of
that's a great
integrity,
chart.
and you have a deficiency in integrity, you're going to be corrupt. But if you're going to have an excess of integrity, that could lead to like legalism. The next one's discernment. If you have a deficiency, you're going to be a fool. If you have an excess, then you're going to be maybe a little judgmental. And so as you look at the continuum, it shows you that you want to be in the middle, kind of like when you're hanging a picture in your house and you got the level on top of the frame. You want to keep the bubble in the middle there and shoot for the virtuous response, and that will be pleasing to the Lord. So that's my first crack at an answer. What is virtue? What would you add to that?
I mean, is there much to add? I mean, you had a chart, you had a good definition. I would only say that virtue is an element of moral excellence. I like the differentiation. It's sort of like the differentiation between saving grace and common grace. That you know, there's people out there that are not Christians, but they experience common grace. God's goodness flows into society. But they might not have experienced the saving grace of salvation that comes from believing in Jesus Christ. So I like that, what Edwards did there. The other thing I might say is that, speaking of Paul's letters and Philippians, which we just mentioned, there's a great part in Philippians 4 where he's talking about rejoicing and not being anxious. But then he says, Philippians 4:8, one of my favorite verses, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you." And so I think cultivating a life of virtue means that we are thinking about those things. They're the forefront in our mind. We're finding people who are virtuous to emulate, and we're constantly placing our focus and our faith on Jesus, who indeed was the person who embodied virtue here on the earth.
Good. I just thought of one more thing. Sorry, this is a long answer, but so the great Tim Keller used to talk about, you know how sometimes you see like someone that you really respected, they're like an upstanding Christian public figure, and then they like their lives blow up, and you're like, what just happened?
What just happened?
It can be kind of, disorienting, right? And Keller said sometimes it's because all they had was common virtue, that their virtues were actually rooted in their own fear or even their own pride. Like, I don't want to be like those people, or they're afraid of the consequences or whatever, but they're actually still self-centered on the inside. And so sometimes you see someone that you thought was a virtuous person kind of blow up their lives because it was still a self-centeredness that was driving them. And then they just had the opportunity to let that self-centeredness manifest itself in a way that was really destructive, and they took it. And so Keller said that's the problem with that person, is they never really had God change their heart. They just jerry-rigged their heart temporarily. He used the word jerry-rig, if you know what I mean by that. But their main goal was always still their own agenda. They were still on the throne in their own lives. And so Keller had this famous line. I don't remember what sermon this was, but it's always stuck with me. He said, "Their goodness was rotten at the root." And I'm like, oh, man, Lord, don't let me have that kind of goodness. It's like rotten at the root that won't last when the temptations come. So maybe this is like what Isaiah the prophet means when he says, all your righteous acts are like filthy rags. Like, so we have to be careful that even our righteous acts are not truly virtuous, because they can be just superficial or external. So let's look for true virtue. Let's let the Spirit of God transform our hearts and manifest the fruit of the Spirit, and have Christ live through us.
That was great.
Answer. That was not a sprint. That was
We'll just send him the show.
That was
There
like an
you go.
800
starts.
meter.
Well, you can cut that out as a little mini right there and send it off to him. What is Christian virtue?
We can do that,
extend
too.
it and then do a short one.
Good question. Thank you for engaging with us there. And now we have
Not a
couple
good
things.
question, a great question.
Great question.
Some
Great
people are saying
question.
it's the best question.
It is. It is the question.
That's what they're saying. Everyone's saying it.
And others.
Body life. There's a few things coming up in the life of our church that we want you to be aware of. First of all, thank you so much for your baking and distributing this weekend. Cookies for a Cause.
Were you one of the men who I heard was baking for the Cookies for a Cause?
No,
That's
and
what Kim
you should
was
be thankful
mentioning.
that I was not. I have no virtue in that area.
Wow,
I'm
okay.
not good with that.
So you're saying
particular-
if you made some cookies, they would be morally corrupt.
It would not be a blessing. So we packed over 500 boxes of cookies. I don't know how many cookies that is, but that's a lot of cookies. And we're going to distribute those half and half. Half of them already went over to Market Street Mission, and we're blessing the folks there in that good ministry. And then tomorrow, the other half is going out with the Feeding Hands Tuesday crew. So thank you very much, ladies, and some men who helped with the Cookies for a Cause event. Great job.
And others.
And others. Great job. Good work. And then the second Body Life announcement is an event that's coming up at the end of February, February 28th, called Gather 25. The church is unified, but it's hard for us to all get together since we're spread out on 6 continents. And so if we're one Lord, one faith, one baptism, how do we show that when we're so separated by geography and distance? Well, Gather 25 is an attempt to get together all Christians for one day, 25 hours at a time, and pray to God to ask him to do a mighty work in our world, in our generation. And so we're going to be participating in that. Not the whole 24 hours, but we are going to be participating in the first 2 hours. So February 28th, Friday night, it's going to start at 7:30. Show up. We're going to have live worship, and then we're going to tune in with the rest of the Christians around the world for a special prayer and worship service with a focus on the persecuted church and those that are sacrificing for Christ and lifting them up in prayer, as well as just asking God to do a mighty work in our day. So Gather 25. Hope you'll make it. Friday night, it's going to be a great time, and we look forward to a wonderful event.
All right. One last thing I wanted to mention. Those of you that attended the conference, or you've been hearing about some follow-ups from Contend, we did announce that we're going to be hosting a church affiliate for the Colson Fellows. I have to do a training this month, but once we get into March, we're going to be doing announcements about info sessions. So if you're somebody who wants to join the Colson Fellows group we're going to have here at NBC, information is coming soon. So just hold tight, and you'll know what the next step is very, very soon.
I'm so excited.
Thank you guys for watching Behind the Pulpit today. It's always good to come into your phone, device, laptop, living room, wherever you're watching this. We're glad to be with you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And special challenge for today: share it. Share the episode. If you're on social media, share it. Or hey, here's a concept: like just share it with one friend. Like just take your phone, hit the share button, and be like, "Hey, this is a podcast that our church does. Check it out," and learn about true virtue or something else we were talking about today. So share the episode. Also, spread the word.
If you haven't, our Underground Sessions podcast episode with Elisa Childers came out on Friday, so feel free to check that out as well.
It's blowing up.
It's a pleasure to have her in the studio.
Thank you, Elisa.
She was in this chair. Elisa Childers was sitting in this chair.
It's a good podcast. A little deeper on some of the topics that she didn't quite go as far into during her talks. I think you'll enjoy that. Thank you guys for watching today. Have a good rest of your day.